lot of weightage is given to practical work. As far as polytechnic education is concerned, the weightage is almost 60%, and in engineering programs, it is around 40%. And this component is very, very important when it comes to the employability of the students, because the acquisition of skills becomes essential when the person has to transfer learning from institution to the world of work. So in this session, I'm going to focus on how to plan, how to organize, and how to evaluate practical work. To begin with, let me ask the audience, how would you like to define practical work? What is practical work exactly? Yes? How would you define this term practical work? Would anyone who would like to respond to?
Evaluation of student,
Hanji?
evaluation of student,
Evaluation नहीं, practical work क्यों होता है? When we say practical
Can
work,
I start?
the one
yes,
which we can visualize easily by
Prac-
looking at it, or you can say hand-on experience.
hands-on experience.
okay,
Okay? When we
can I
say
say that?
hands-on experience,
I think the practical work is providing skills to the student so
okay?
that to make him employable.
So
That is
that
the
is the purpose of practical work. But what practical in work involves or includes?
yes, that is providing skills to the student.
Okay, Vikas, you wanted to say something? Okay, so maybe you want to say that whatever principles they have learnt in theory, they are being verified in practicals. Okay, that is another purpose of the practical work. So let's first of all see this: scientists explore, experiment, and discover. Engineers design, build, and create. So that is the importance of acquisition of skills in the life of an engineer. And practical work, when we say, it involves actual manipulation of the task, machinery, equipment, tools, and materials. Because whenever you take the student to the laboratory, he is dealing with certain experimental setup, which involves certain apparatus, certain tools, measuring tools. And then if you are taking the student to the workshop, it involves operating a machine, handling the tools, handling the techniques, handling the material. So practical work in nutshell involves manipulation or handling of machinery, equipment, tools, material, and it provides direct experience to the learners with the materials or the event. And when we say practical work, you can look at the second definition. It involves both the cognitive aspect of the individual and it involves psychomotor skills. Performing a particular task always precedes or always involve a component whereby knowledge has to be acquired by the student. And yesterday we were taking an example of a car, that if you want to drive a car, you need to have the knowledge of the car. Similarly, if you are taking the students to the machine, that may be lathe, maybe drill machine, maybe they are dealing with the engine, or they are computer science students dealing with the computers, or they are dealing with the electrical laboratory, so they are doing certain experiments and they are dealing with the circuits, or the maybe they are dealing with taking readings with meters, ammeters, voltmeter, and so on, or they are simulating by using certain softwares, and they are likely to have the knowledge of those machinery, equipment, tools, and software. That is one component which is concerned with intellectual part or cognitive aspect. Then it involves psychomotor skills on the part of individual, that is, he is involved in muscular coordination by handling machinery, equipment, etc. In addition to that, as yesterday we said, there are three different types of objectives. That is, there are objectives cognitive domain, psychomotor domain, and affective domain. So when we are taking our students for practical work, we also aim at bringing certain changes in their attitudes and values. For example, handling the machinery equipment with care is an attitude. Keeping the working area clean is an attitude. Sticking to the task which has been assigned to the student is an attitude. Ingenuity in the use of the material, that is, ensuring optimal utilization of the materials which have been provided to the student, is an example of attitude. Or if the lab work or the practical work has been assigned in group, then cooperating with other team members, performing the individual responsibility, sticking to the time, that also is a matter of attitude. So practical work also aims at developing the cognitive, some of the cognitive aspects, or achieving objectives in cognitive domain, or achieving objectives in psychomotor domain, and achieving objectives in affective domain. So all the three components are covered in the practical work also. Here you can have a look at what are the broad aims of practical work. My friends were giving the purposes. So the very first aim of practical work is that a person tries to acquire the ability to plan practical procedures and techniques for solving particular problems. Because at present we are giving all expository exposure to our students, but the focus must shift from expository exposure to guided discovery and discovery exposure, where a problem is given to the student and he tries to evolve a procedure or a technique or a method of solving a problem. Then it aims at improving or developing certain manipulative skills among the students. Now this, I hope this term is clear. Manipulative skill is handling of machinery, equipment and tools. Then when we talk in terms of the laboratory experiences, a student is required to take certain or make certain observations. So ability to observe and record those observations, even that ability is a part of your practical work. And then ability to assess and interpret results. So whatever readings have been taken, certain calculations are done and conclusions are drawn on the basis of those calculations. And if we see, then we are also able to develop certain work related attitudes among our students. And specifically when we talk in terms of the workshop experiences, then the student is required apply whatever has been learned in theory, whatever has been learned in the various subjects, that is being applied in solving a real life problem or designing certain product or developing certain products. And then the person also develops an ability to design and develop certain innovative products or innovative procedures or innovative techniques. So laboratory and workshop, they provide ample opportunities to the students to explore, to experiment and innovate. So even the innovations are possible if the student spends lot of time in the laboratory or the workshop as per the requirements of the discipline. Now coming to the nature of practical work which is carried out in the technical institutions, you will agree with me that we can simply say there is lab work, there are workshop exercises. Maybe in computer science we don't have a workshop, but otherwise we do have workshops. Maybe electrical doesn't have a workshop, or electrical has a workshop. Electrical has a workshop. Then the students of civil engineering, they are taken for the field work, and where they do the surveys in the real life situation. The basic difference between the lab work and the field work is that in the laboratory one can control number of variables, whereas in case of field work the lab work or the experimentation is carried out in the real life setting. So the person has no control over the traffic, no control over the contour, and then the surveying is done in the real life situation. Workshop exercises like we have for the mechanical, for electrical, for civil workshop also is there. Then drawing work is another component, or we say drawing is the language of engineers. So every engineer, though we have lot many softwares which have come up, but the ability to interpret the drawing is very, very important for any engineer. So drawing work is organized for various discipline, and maybe the first year drawing is a compulsory subject, engineering drawing. Then in addition to these, you also organize major project work for your students, and some problem is taken up by the students, and then they try to find out solution to that problem, or they take up a project of developing certain product and they develop that product, and that also can be labeled as project work. Now we'll go into the nitty-gritty of the practical work, that is the lab work. So you can see what the aims I have given to you. Out of those aims, you can see the broad is that a person is able to create a link between a theory and practical. It is not essential that you first teach everything in the theory class. You can directly take the student to the lab, give him the problem, demonstrate how that is being done, and then the student is allowed to manipulate the machinery and equipment. He makes certain readings, and then he comes out with the conclusion that voltage is directly proportional to. It is not essential that beforehand I teach him Ohm's law and then he verifies the Ohm law. You can first go to the lab, do the experiment, take the reading. On the basis of the reading, you come to the conclusion voltage is directly proportional to I. But if you are taking theory, then the student is verifying the law which he has studied in the classroom, and he is simply doing the verification of those principles in the lab setting. And that is what is referred to as expository teaching. And we must shift our focus from expository to discovery learning or guided discovery learning. Then they acquire the ability to perform experiment, and in a process they develop scientific way of looking at or thinking, scientific way of thinking. That means formulating the hypothesis, collecting the data, verifying the hypothesis. That is the scientific way of thinking. So you try to analyze, you try to evaluate, and you draw the conclusion. Then when it comes to this, I have already spoken. So workshop objectives are given below, that it is primarily application of the learned knowledge and skills. So I'm not going to repeat all this. And you can see when it comes to project work, the person is required to solve a live problem. So design a product which can be of use in solving a real life problem. And then in the process, the person is also able to develop the communication skills, because he needs to communicate to the people from he requires information. His writing skills are improved because the person is required to make a report at the end of project work. And it also involves creativity on the part of the individual, because many of our students are taking up projects which are repetitive, less challenging. But what industry is looking at is that the person should be able to give a novel solution, an original solution to the problem. And if a problem is given, the person should be able to generate large number of alternatives, and then out of that original response or original answer which is feasible and which has certain worth for the industry or the society, that is selected. So creative solutions are can be there as an outcome of the project work. Then the project work, if assigned in groups, it aims at developing the team building skills among the students. So how to work in teams, that is developed. Then project work also enables the students to be resourceful, because no institution has adequate resources which can be used for completion of project work. So the student has to tap the resources which are available in the industry, which are available in other institutions, which are available in the other organizations, and maybe for gathering information from various sources, he has to tap the various resources. So whether the person is resourceful or not, that also contribute to the success of a particular project. So these are broadly the objectives of the so when we talk in terms of the practical work, let me ask my colleagues first, how do you plan the practical work? Yes, give me the responses. How do you go about planning the practical work? Let me start from Vikas first. Are you handling practical work? How do you go about? हाँ, लैब नहीं लेते हो, कोई वर्कशॉप नहीं लेते हो? हाँ, ओके, 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 जी ठीक है, ठीक है. Thank you very much. Anyone from computer science would like to share how you go about planning the practical work? Yes. Can we listen to one of the participants? How do you go about planning the practical work? Are they there? Yes. Okay. Can I request the people from electrical and electronics department?
First of
Yes.
all, we have to make manuals.
Okay.
In manuals, we have tried different experiments, experiment list. Then in aim of experiment, equipment required, theory and procedure.
Okay.
Students, students learn from manuals. Then they have an experience. Then they make a circuit diagram.
Okay. Okay. So thank you very much for sharing your experience. If anyone else would like to, or the same procedure is being followed. All of you follow the same procedure?
Yes.
Okay, okay. But
How
when
many you
there are lot of criticism against the way we organize the practical work, and as I said in the beginning, that not more than 40 to 50% of the practical work is carried out. And unless and until we organized in toto whatever has been specified in the curriculum, the students will not be able to acquire the skills. So the process should start in the beginning of the semester. And while we are planning for the practical work, it is a live example that what I have seen at Indo-Swiss Training Center, I have seen at YMCA Faridabad. What they do in the beginning of the semester, they prepare a chart. All the experiments which are to be conducted in a laboratory or the workshop exercises which are to be organized in the workshop, the experiment number 1, then they have all the students enlisted. Against it, it is written experiment number 1, experiment number 2, 3, 4, and 10. So the dates are mentioned against the experiment number, on which date experiment number 1 will be taken up, 2 will be taken up. Then grouping of student is done if it is to be performed in groups, and they also try to identify what are the objectives of that experiment and what machinery equipment would be required. So once they see the requirements, then the teacher goes to the laboratory, goes to the workshop and see how many machinery, equipment and tools are available. And he tries to identify the gap between the material, the machinery, the tools required as per the number of the students and the availability of those in the laboratory or the workshop. The benefit of this exercise is that on the day when you are going to conduct the experiment, then you have made all the arrangements, you have ensured that all the students are able to get the machinery and equipment. Otherwise, if there is inadequate machinery, equipment and raw material available, maybe you are not able to organize the practical work successfully. So once you identify the requirement for additional material, machinery, equipment, tool, then the task of the teacher is to procure and develop those materials, because that material at present may not be available in your department, but another department has the similar kind of machinery equipment. So can I utilize the material and equipment which is available in the other department? That is one. You can also ensure exploiting the potential of the other institutions wherever those resources are available. So sharing of resources and networking with other institutions, networking with industry is possible if you had taken the stock initially in the beginning of the semester. You can plan for that. If the material is required, then it becomes the responsibility of the department to give the requisition and procure the material well in time before the practical work is organized. So that is the purpose which this kind of planning will help if you carry out this kind of planning in the beginning of the semester. Then you need to decide, say for example, there are only 5 dates which are available. So you have to see that the students cannot be, now you cannot have lathe machine immediately. So you have to decide that the students are to be grouped. So grouping has to be done for a particular experiment. Then you need to prepare the schedule that semester begins on this date. Say it begins in August, it continues up to December, and then you have so many classes scheduled in August, the spell or the semester starting from August to December. So you try to give dates and you try to give alternate dates. Say of 3 groups, they'll be performing the first experiment, 2 groups, they'll be performing the second experiments, and so on. Even that organization can be done if you take stock of the availability of machinery, equipment, and tools in the beginning of the semester. Computer is a field where you don't need to actually assign work in groups, because every student is now required to bring a laptop, or your laboratories are well equipped with the computers, so you can assign independent tasks as far as the laboratory work is concerned. But some of the experiments, they need to be given in groups to develop the team building among the students. And how do we go about planning a skill lesson? One is that you are only ensuring the availability of material, machinery, equipment, tools, and the raw material. And you are trying to schedule the various experiments. Another important aspect at the planning stage is that when we go and teach a theory lesson, we do the task analysis, that is referred to as topic analysis. Topic analysis means, or or when we come to the skill lesson, that means we need to break down the skill into its constituent parts, and that is what is referred to as skill analysis. So a teacher needs to carry out the skill analysis, and skill analysis is nothing but you need to have the broad. Say, yesterday we had taken up, again I am referring back to Ohm's law. You will say that I am only taking up an example of Ohm's law, but easy to give you. The objective of Ohm's law is, it is verify Ohm's law, right? Verify Ohm's law. And the procedural steps, as I said, so when I say verify Ohm's law, that means the person has to perform number of duties. What are those duties? The very first duty is he has to select appropriate equipment, machinery, and tools, right? Second is the person has to draw a circuit diagram. Then he has to make connections as per the circuit diagram. Then the person has to provide the input and record output. These are the major 4 duties which a person needs to perform if he has to verify the Ohm's law. And when I say select circuit diagram and he has to make connections, that means as per the circuit diagram he has to make the connection, right? So these are the major duties. But each duty in further has certain activities which are performed by the individual. So when I say select, so he tries to first identify, then he selects the appropriate material. So 2 activities are there as far as selection of the appropriate material and equipment is concerned. When I say circuit diagram, then that means he is preparing a circuit diagram. So one act is involved here. Then make connections. So he is trying to procure the relevant material, machinery, and then he is making connection. So first one, what will be the task? Procure the material, then make the connection. How do you go about? As per the circuit diagram. So again, there is a procedural steps which are involved to make the connection. So when you break down the skill into its constituent parts, you know the sequence in which you have to perform the experiment. And this will facilitate learning on the part of the individual. The second activity which a teacher needs to adopt is write expected outcomes. What a student will be able to do at the end of the experiment, those are to be written. And then select appropriate strategy. That means you have to find out which particular way you would like to organize the practical. And then you have to also, at the planning stage, you need to explicitly state the criteria for evaluating student performance in the practical work. Then, if the skill is complex, demonstration needs to be given by the teacher. If the skill is simple, The simple instructional sheet can be given to the students. Students can follow the direction and can complete the experiment. Then you need to develop either checklist, rubrics, or the rating scales as per the criteria of evaluation. So planning a skill lesson, simply taking up the manual, giving the manual to the students, and then allowing them to experiment does not suffice. A teacher needs to be very sure what actually is involved in the performance of the experiment, what machinery, equipment, tools would be required. You have to ensure their availability in the lab or the workshop. You have to ensure that the competence which is expected of them at the end of the experiment, that is being achieved by ensuring the adoption of appropriate strategy. So there are number of tasks which are to be completed by the teachers. And then comes, there may not be one way of performing the experiment. There can be different ways of performing the experiment, and thereby the teacher should not depend only on the manual. The teacher should look at the latest research articles which appear in various journals. So there may be 3 or 4 or 5 ways of doing the experiment. So once you go through the literature which is available, then you find out which particular strategy would be more useful for my student, for my class. You also try to gather the relevant knowledge which is required to go to the class and perform the experiment. Many of our teachers, they are not apt at the practical work. So they give the work to the student and take a seat in the lab or the workshop. But what is required is that the teacher should be proficient in handling machinery, equipment and tools or the softwares himself or herself. Only then he can demonstrate effectively to the students. So once you want to give a demonstration, lot of practice is needed prior to going to the laboratory or the workshop. So without practice, maybe you are not able to handle the practical work. So do the practice which is required to give an effective demonstration. And if need be, a person who is available in the institution, lab or the workshop, a technician, a workshop person, or maybe an industrial expert, or maybe any other colleague who's more proficient in taking up or handling the practical work, you may take the help of that person and try to acquire the required proficiency in handling the work. Then comes the actual performance by the teacher in the classroom. Now, when you are going to for a practical work, you need to give the introduction to the experiment. You must build the relevance, why they need to perform the particular experiment and why they need to acquire the skills for which you are taking them to the workshop. So build the relevance of taking up the practical. Try to ensure that the relevant theoretical aspects which are used in that experiment, the students have the clear idea of those concepts and principles. So pose questions related to the previous knowledge and skills and attitude which they must bring to the classroom. And if the skill is complex, then the demonstration has to be given by the teacher. So what are some of the principles which you must take into account while giving a demonstration? Can anybody elaborate on that? Yes, a teacher who is going to demonstrate, what are some of the principles which are to be taken into account? Yes, any participant would like to share? See, ma'am, anybody who would like to share what kind of principles you need to take into account while giving a demonstration?
That depends on the experiment.
Okay, but there are certain generalized principles which must be taken into account. अगर मैंने कुछ करके दिखाना है, so there are certain things which you would like to take into account. नहीं? Okay, let विकास कुछ कहना चाहोगे? Okay, right. Okay. समझ में. That is very correct. He has said the very first principle of demonstration is that you must ensure that whatever task you are performing, each student is able to visualize or see that task. A hyperlink can explain new technical terms. If the experiment involves certain new terminology, the definition of that terminology must be given to the student. What are the procedural steps? Those procedural steps are to be explained to the students, and side by side you are trying to demonstrate the skill. Now say you are setting the apparatus, so you say setting, at the same time you explain how the apparatus is to be set up. So you are demonstrating, you are explaining, and special care has to be taken that safety precautions which are to be observed, they need to be highlighted in the explanation. And while you are explaining, you must try to relate the previous knowledge of the learner to whatever new information you are providing to the student. So lot of interaction must take place between the teacher and the student while you are demonstrating the particular skill to your student. Or it can also be done, I see that the electrical people, they use a lab view and they are giving demonstration how to use that. Now, every activity or every step which the teacher is demonstrating, the same step is being repeated by the students on their independent work benches. That is, they are independently performing that step on their computers because they have all downloaded the software on their computers, right? So side by side, the student is performing when the teacher is demonstrating. Or if it is a skill which is simple and it can be demonstrated at one go, then you give a demonstration and ensure all these points, and then you can request the students now to go in for practice. And you are, what I have said, that you must ensure the active involvement of your students when you are giving a demonstration, and you should give adequate opportunities to your students to clarify their doubts. So wherever the student has a question, that must be answered and student must be satisfied so that he can keep the pace with the teacher. Then once you are demonstrating, it is not essential that you carry out all the tasks yourself. If it is actual machinery, actual tools which are taken care of, then you can involve your students in handling of that machinery, equipment and tool. I still remember when we used to do science experiments at school level, then the teacher used to call student turn by turn, and she used to involve the student in setting the apparatus, in taking the readings, in jotting down the readings, and so on. So that way similar procedure needs to be adopted when the teacher is demonstrating a particular skill to the class. And at the end, once you have finished or at different sections, you must try to recapitulate in nutshell. These are the procedures, these are the procedural steps which need to be followed to carry out the experiment. So demonstration, while you are giving, You must take into account some of these points. Then comes when while you are performing, now you are actually grouping your students as per the strategy which you have thought of, and you allocate. Now, how do we promote team building? At present, what happens if you are giving tasks to 4 students, maybe 50% of those students are performing the practical. 2 student or 1 student is left out. He's only an observer. He doesn't participate in any way in the performance of the practical. So a teacher must ensure that each individual in the group has active participation in the performance of the experiment. How can we ensure? Say, if there are 4 students and doing an experiment in the lab, I would tell them that, okay, you have to take 4 readings. First student will provide the input, record the output. Then comes the second student. He will provide the input and take the reading. Third student, fourth student. So as many students are there, they will get an opportunity to actually get involved in the experiment. And once these 4 readings are taken up, then they can do the calculation independently and come out with the conclusion to that experiment. Or say, for example, if you have 10 steps which are involved in the process of completion of the experiment, then maybe a student, first 2 to 3 steps are performed by one, another 2 to 3 are performed by another 2 to 3 are performed by another, first turn, then second turn, then third turn. Because the students who are at learning stage, one practical session is not enough. We have to provide adequate practice to our learners. So for that matter, one performance is not enough. So if we can plan for the repetition kind of that experiment as per the number of the students, then it will be really of use, right? Then comes that while they are performing, the students may have certain difficulties, may have certain questions. So the task of the teacher is to move from one group to another. And when you go nearer to the student, you can ask what they are actually performing, why they are performing. So viva voce, which you normally plan to be conducted at the end of the experiment or end of the exercise, that can take place while the students are working on the experiment or the exercise. So you save lot of time for viva voce, and then you can also take up the questions which are posed by the student. So while they are performing, maybe they are encountering, or there is a question which comes to your mind, that why this particular job is uh, uh, placed in such a manner or put on a voice in such a manner. So they can pose those questions and clarify those questions. Then while they are performing, the role of the teacher is also to identify the strengths of the person and the weaknesses of the person. That means the drawbacks or the errors which they are committing while they are performing the experiment. So if you see that the posture of the student is not correct when he is performing in the workshop, you must provide the feedback how to stand, how to carry out the exercise. Or if he's working in the lab, then if all the procedural steps, whether he has taken it or doing it correctly or not, so you can provide corrective feedback to your students to improve upon their performance. And then the task of the teacher is to evaluate the performance of the student. So there are number of things which the teacher needs to take into account while the students are performing. Now this is with respect to the labs and the workshop. Now we come to the project. Now here you will see a difference, that when project work is actually extended piece of work. It may take 1 month, it may take 3 months, it may take 6 months, right? So it depends upon the nature of the project, how much time you would allow, and it depends upon the curricular requirements, whether project work is for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, or 6 months. And then it involves whether you can give this project work either independently to your students or you can give it in groups, right? So what is the normally you group them? You group them. So it may involve investigation or study of a situation. Say some of the students can take up a project, the status of total quality management in the electronics industry in the vicinity, right? So maybe they have taken up this kind of a study which would require gathering of the data from the industry, then collating that and then analyzing and interpreting the data. Or a person might take up a study, a case study of award winning industry, electronics industry or electrical industry in the Union Territory of Chandigarh. So if there is one award-winning industry, so the person goes deeper and find out how that industry is able to get a award. So what has gone into, so that other industries can replicate that kind of change or that kind of environment or that kind of processes or structure in their industry. It can also be that a person takes up a project whereby he tries to solve a live problem being faced by the industry. Now here, say one of our students at master's level, she is in mechanical and she has taken up the PTL. One live problem was there, that a die, when the product used to be there, then there used to appear cracks on the product. So she has taken up why this is happening, why there are cracks. So she tried to find out an appropriate solution to the problem, and then that problem solution has been given to the industry, and industry may or may not, because that is not, I cannot force the industry to use that strategy, but she has come out with a solution to that problem. And or maybe that you have taken up a problem, like you had say there is a car, after 10,000 kilometers, say the gears break, right? Now this is a problem, why there is a breakage of gear. Can you now solve this problem by giving them a design of a gear, or the material of the gear can be changed, or you can think of an innovative solution whereby the gear which is broken, can it be repaired and then installed? So maybe you can think of. Or whenever you are talking in terms of that a locality where there are losses in transmission of the energy, electrical energy. So electricity में losses आ रहे हैं. So there are, so one person can take up a study of that area, find out why there are transmission losses, and then come out with the strategies which can be adopted to mitigate those losses. Or maybe you are coming out with a solution, like now the people are taking up projects that the mobile phones and the placement of like the towers, we are all using the mobile phones and their towers, and they're affecting the health of the individual. So one can take up a study where it can see the impact of those towers on the health of the individuals, and come out with a plan how these towers can be planned outside the city. Now this is going on, so one can think of where actually the effect of these towers is more, and it is a lot of research is going on in this area. Or computer science people, like when they're taking up one student has actually taken up a study that can the causes of the cancer can be diagnosed with the help of computerized program so that precautions can be taken at an early stage. So diagnosis of a diagnosis of cancer using a computerized program, that is being taken up. Can we predict that the person is likely to have? Even that is being taken up. So there are a lot of interdisciplinary projects which can be taken up, or one can, now when you're talking of sustainable development, the projects may pertain to that. So maybe somebody in your college can take up a project on the energy audit of the department, energy audit of the institute, energy audit of a particular community, and he comes out with strategies whereby you can optimally use the energy. Or one can think of how solar energy can be utilized for sustainable development, because that is available in abundance to us. So such kind of projects which can help in improving the quality of life of people or solve a particular problem of the industry, they can be taken up. Or a theme, or innovating or creating a new object. So maybe you come out with a new design for antenna. So you are designing an antenna which is more productive, more efficient, more effective in comparison to what antenna at present which are available. Or maybe you design an engine which is more efficient, right? Or maybe you design uh, mm, uh, LEDs जैसे design हो गई हैं, so they are more energy efficient. So you can design certain mechanism whereby you can save energy, right? So number of, or one person can also, if there is some new area which is emerging, an in-depth study of that area can also be taken up as a project. So project work can take up number of dimensions. It can be a study of an institution, study of an industry, study of a technique, study of a process, or it may lead to solving a particular problem, or may involve in-depth study of certain processes, or maybe the project may be innovating, that is designing a new technique, designing a new material, designing a new process, or designing a new language, or maybe the people come out with how to minimize these cyber threats to the information. So you can think of number of aspects. And when we say the project work, it passes through number of stages. एग्री करते हो? आपने मुझे दिया, Vikas has already given me that we try to select a project, group the student, and so on, right? So the very first important stage in any project work is you try to select a problem. Many times, as I said, people take up repetitive projects. So that is not required. Even the people go for submitting a ready-made project also. There are a number of sites now on the internet which advocate that these are the projects which are available, or these are the projects which can be prepared, and you can contact the agency, they give the ready-made project to you. So the problems are there, the project is completed by them, and the students submit. I think we as teachers need to minimize this kind of a practice by asking our students to take up projects, and they complete those projects under our own supervision in the laboratories and workshop of the institute. Or we must ensure that if they have taken up an industry, then there is designated person under whose supervision they complete the project. I know Chandigarh University, they have tied up with number of industries, about 15. Is it okay? Yes, Chandigarh University. How many industries you have tied up?
15. We don't have exact figure, but around
50?
15. Around 15, 15, one
Around
five.
15. Okay. And the industry people, they are giving problems to the students and they can take up those as projects also. And they are being trained there and they are trying to find solution to the problems. So selecting a problem involves that student must take the initiative to finalize a problem, because if a teacher gives a problem to the student, then student doesn't own the responsibility of completing that problem or the project. He says teacher ne de diya. But once I as a student say I would like to work on this, I own the project and I make sure that I complete the project. Another important aspect at selection of a problem is that the problem which is taken up, for that you must take stock of whether the resources are available in the institute. If not, whether the student will be able to tap the resources from other organization, institutions or industry, must be sure that he'll be able to execute or implement the project. Then the third thing which you must ensure is that the problem which has been taken up is original, novel. It is not something for which 10 times somebody has already worked on that problem or somebody has already submitted a project on that. Then the teacher must ensure that the problem which has been taken up, it must be feasible within the time which is available, within the resources which are available. And then the teacher must assess who is going to benefit from the project which the student is finalizing, whether he himself is going to benefit, whether the department is going to benefit, whether the institute is going to benefit, industry is going to benefit, or society at large is going to benefit from the project. So the worthwhileness of the problem which the student has selected as a project, that must be assessed. Or you can think of whether the student is going to add new knowledge to the discipline which he is specializing in. Then comes the planning stage. Planning requires that a person defines the problem, selects the appropriate methodology for implementing the project, then the person is able to organize the resources, prepare a time schedule for implementing the project. So planning is defining the problem. He must be able to say what exactly will be the objective which he would like to achieve by taking up this project. And he must be able to give you the rationale why this particular project needs to be accomplished. And he must be clear about the methodology which he would follow to implement the project. And then you must see that he plans for resources and you must ensure that he tries to identify the right kind of resources, the right amount of resources which would be required to implement, and then he prepares the time schedule for the time which is available for the implementation of the project. Then comes execution. That is, whatever has been planned, the student now implements that plan and tries to, it is actual implementation of the planned processes. So if he has taken up a project, then in the lab he is going to follow certain procedure, he is going to manipulate certain machinery, equipment and tools, he is going to come out with a certain product or a technique or a process. If he is going to innovate on that, then you must see that the student must be able to, 4 5 things are important at this stage when we talk in terms of the implement. So when we are talking of execution of the project, then ability to follow correct procedure is one. Manipulative skills of the student is another, which you must ensure if he's handling machinery, equipment, and tools. Then third thing is resourcefulness of the student. Then innovativeness. How creative is the individual? Then whether the student is able to solve the problems which he is facing during the execution or implementation of the project, because many students would try to leave the project in between because they are not able to find solution to the problems which they are facing. So once they are stuck up, the students get demotivated. So you have to see that the students are able to solve the problems which they encounter so that they can sustain the motivational level. And you must also see that if it is a group work, then each individual in the group is performing the task or the activity which has been designed assigned to that particular individual. So to ensure proper team building. Then execution also involves that you must check whether the student is regularly performing the regularly working on the project as per the schedule, and whether he is able to achieve the targets as per the schedule. That you must ensure. Then comes report writing. Once the project has been executed, the next task which a student needs to perform is to write a report on the project. And believe me, I have seen few reports which are doesn't have coherence. So the content, how the report is to be organized, that must be a clear cut guideline must go to the student. The very first chapter must give you the introduction, the rationale, why this project was taken up, what were the objectives of the project, and then you must try to build the relevance or the significance of the project. Then the second chapter must give a brief of what is the research which has been carried out in this area. The project report also gives whether this problem has been addressed by others and what work they have carried out, and then you come out what strategy you would like to use, that is methodology you had followed to execute the project. So आपने जो आपका design use किया experimental setup, and then what kind of data you have been able to generate, and then what controls were exercised, you give it that project me, and then you come to the next chapter. So what are the outcomes, that is results which you have obtained. So you go by that analysis of data and interpretation of results. And then the last chapter must give you a brief about summary and conclusion in general. But if the person has taken up a case study of an institution and organization, then the structure may be different. So you have taken up the case study of the manufacturing process in award-winning industry, right? So you are giving the manufacturing processes. You are giving, maybe that is your theoretical foundation which you are giving in the first part. Then you are going to the industry and you are detailing out the industry, what are the product and services, what is the organizational structure, and what are the manufacturing processes. Now you go into, you have studied manufacturing processes. So what are the major manufacturing processes, how they are, because the case study doesn't answer what, it answers the question of why and what. So how you have built up the case, for who you have interviewed, methodology you give, then you come to the actual description of the manufacturing processes in that industry. Then you give your conclusions on that. So it will depend upon what kind of project the person has taken up. So you try to organize. So there has to be coherence in the writing style of the individual, and it must clearly communicate the objective of that, right? Then many a times as teachers we organize seminars, right? So presentation is given by the student, or a open seminar is given by the student on the project report. There you check how clear is the person about the project, about the methodology, about the conclusions which he has drawn, and then you must see that the person has the ability to draw correct conclusions of the project which he has accomplished. So these are the various stages in the project work. Now, yesterday I posed this question to one of the colleagues, and he tried to answer how the practical work is assessed. He said we see how the persons perform the experiment, right? Performance uski check karte hain. So we'll see what are the essential components of assessing performance in practical work. Broadly, you can classify them into four. Process evaluation. This is what you refer to, that we try to evaluate the performance of the student on the task. But the procedure you couldn't give me. So I'll give you the elements which can go into the process evaluation. And why process evaluation needs to be carried out? Because a student is a learner. He is novice. Process is more important than the product. And if correct process is followed, there is greater likelihood that the right kind of product will come out. ठीक बात है? सही है. So process evaluation में क्या होता है कि आप जो प्रोसीजर फॉलो करा गया है उसको आप मॉनिटर करते हो. Product evaluation is to be carried out wherever there is tangible product coming out as a result of the experimentation or the exercise. Like workshop में जितना काम करते हैं, there is some product which comes out. या अगर हाँ जी, अगर कोई आप टूल डिजाइन कर रहे हैं या कोई जॉब डिजाइन कर रहे हैं, कोई पार्ट डिजाइन कर रहे हैं, कोई कंपोनेंट डिजाइन कर रहे हैं, इसी तरह कंप्यूटर में व्हेन यू आस्क द स्टूडेंट टू राइट प्रोग्राम्स, प्रोग्राम जो राइट करा है उसने इज अ प्रोडक्ट. अब उसको आपने एक्सिक्यूट किया, देन देयर इज अ रिजल्ट व्हिच इज कमिंग आउट. सो आपने प्रोग्राम देखना है, आपने उसका एक्सिक्यूट करने के बाद उसके क्या रिजल्ट आए वो चेक करने. तो बोथ आर कैन बी टर्म्ड एज ए प्रोडक्ट. सो क्वालिटी ऑफ प्रोडक्ट नीड्स टू बी असेस्ड. देन क्वालिटी ऑफ द रिपोर्ट. अगर कहीं पे प्रोडक्ट इज नॉट देयर एंड सिंपली द पर्सन हैज वेरीफाइड अ लॉ and he is writing the journal article, the report writing is done, so you need to give some weightage to the report which is written by the student. Then major components can be general behavior, where you, if it is independent work, then what are some of the elements which should go into, because these are the objectives in effective domain. Then the viva voce. These are the four. Now let's have a closer look at when it is a lab work. क्या होगा? I think आप इसको करोगे, ये पढ़ा जाएगा. आप हाँ जी आगे जाओ. एक खाली रह गया मुझे. हाँ जी. Is it readable? Yes. My friends at Chandigarh University, are the components readable?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So here we first take up lab work. Now yesterday you were telling me that maybe all the experiments which are there, they are assessed from 10 marks, or maybe you have allowed the students to perform the experiment. Then once they have accomplished a sizable number of experiments, there is a comprehensive practical test which is given to the student for grading purposes. Or if you're using it for internal assessment, each experiment, if you're giving say 10 marks to each experiment, then one can think of that performance on task, quality of product, general behavior, and viva voce. Maybe I would like to give three marks, 3 marks for the performance on task, 3 marks for quality of product, 2 marks for general behavior, and 2 marks for viva voce. So I decide in the beginning when I'm planning the evaluation of my students and performance on task. Now you can see what comes under performance on task. It comes ability to carry out experiment. That means ability to follow the correct procedure, because each experiment has number of steps. They are to be performed in a sequence, in a set sequence. So whether the student is able to follow those procedural steps in correct order, that is one aspect. Whether the person is able to handle the machinery and equipment, this is the second aspect. And the third aspect in lab experiment is ability to observe and record. So ये 3 component, so तीनों component को मैं एक mark दे सकती हूँ out of the 3 I have given to performance on task. Then अब देखिए, अगर मुझे ये तीनों element को assess करना है, what do I need? I need a checklist जिसमें वो सारे procedural step लिखे हुए हैं. When the students are performing the experiment, I go from one group to another और मैं टिक काम कर लेती हूँ कि पहले बच्चे ने सारे steps जो भी step कर रहा है उससे पहले वाले ले लिए हैं या नहीं लिए. Go to the another one, assure that he has correctly done that, and I go from one group or one student to another student. And this requires a checklist with the teacher. टीचर के पास चेकलिस्ट होना जरूरी है कि क्या प्रोसीजरल स्टेप है. एंड देन ऑब्जेक्टिवली यू आर evaluating your student, assessing the performance of your student. आगे चलते हैं, quality of product. So I said quality of product, here you will see I have only taken, because it's a lab, majority of the lab experiments may not lead to tangible outcome. But yes, in computers, if you have asked them to develop a software, you have asked them to write a program, you have asked them to write instructions, so वो सब आपकी product बन जाते. So that product needs to be evaluated. But otherwise, if you are simply verifying the laws, then quality of reporting results. अब देखिए जो report है उसमें objective लिखा है, theory लिखा है, वो तो copy कर रहा है manual से. उसकी आप कोई वेटेज मत दीजिए. वेटेज किसको देनी है कि जो उसने ऑब्जर्वेशंस की थी, उसने अब उसकी कैलकुलेशन की. सो व्हाट इज द क्वालिटी ऑफ द रिजल्ट्स व्हिच ही हैज अराइव्ड एट, एंड व्हाट आर द कंक्लूजंस व्हिच द पर्सन हैज ड्रॉन, हाउ ही इज एबल टू इंटरप्रेट द रिजल्ट्स. सो ये दो एस्पेक्ट्स आप, या अगर ज्यादा से ज्यादा उसने कोई आपकी इलस्ट्रेशंस हैं, कोई ड्राइंग है, कोई डायग्राम है वो बनाई है, कोई ग्राफ बनाया है, then you add a component of quality of illustration, उसको आप weightage दे सकते हैं. Then general behavior, attendance and punctuality, because here 100% attendance, yesterday I said I am not in favor of attendance, I am in favor of punctuality, because in the industry regularity and punctuality will go together. There it becomes important. So 100% attendance must be ensured as far as practical work is concerned, and it should be a condition. So weightage may not be given to that. Punctuality, yes. Care of equipment can be another component. Attitude towards colleagues. When I say colleagues is not the right word. Attitude towards other members, that means other members in the group. So whether he gives respect to other members or cooperates with them, So you can be more specific and write cooperate with other members. Care of working space, independence, use of working time. So I have just enlisted 6 points here. So you cannot, if you think you would like to only take up 3 or 4, or you can think of your own criteria for general behavior. So specify that criteria before you actually evaluate your students on these elements. Then the viva voce. Viva voce is normally undertaken to check the understanding of the student, what he's performing, why he's performing, and how it has to be done. So first thing is knowledge of underlying concepts, principles. Second thing is ability to reason. So whether he can say if this program, this instruction is to be written in this manner, why it cannot be written the other way? Why? You must ask him why. है ना? If you ask him, okay, he's doing some program, so save करते चले जाना चाहिए. आप कहते हो why it should be saved? So he should be able to answer. So जैसे आपने कहा कि okay, simultaneous processing हो रही है किसी task की. So why he has not preferred a linear processing? Why he is having a simultaneous processing of the data? उसका क्या फायदा है और linear processing का क्या फायदा है? वो आप पूछ सकते हैं उससे. So ask questions why it needs to be done in this manner and not the other way. Then ability to draw conclusions and generalization. So आप देखिए कि जैसे हम कर रहे हैं laboratory की assessment, it requires changes in the procedure because the student must have an idea how he is going to be evaluated. अगर मुझे पता हो कि मेरी assessment इस criteria के base पे है, तो मे बी पहले एक्सपेरिमेंट में मेरी अच्छे मार्क्स नहीं आए हैं, आपने मुझे 10 में से 5 ही दिए हैं. सो आई नो वेयर आई हैव स्कोप फॉर इम्प्रूवमेंट. मे बी इन द नेक्स्ट एक्सपेरिमेंट आई विल ट्राई टू इम्प्रूव माई ओन परफॉर्मेंस एज अ स्टूडेंट. देन वर्कशॉप में आप देखिए इसमें एलिमेंट्स थोड़े से डिफर कर रहे हैं. ब्रॉड कंपोनेंट आर द सेम, बट इफ यू हैव अ लुक एट दैट, वर्कशॉप एक्सरसाइजेस में ड्राइंग बनाना जरूरी है. सो एबिलिटी टू रीड अ ड्राइंग पहले तो वो जरूरी है. इंटरप्रेट द ड्राइंग, देन एबिलिटी टू फॉलो करेक्ट प्रोसीजर, मैनिपुलेटिव स्किल सेम है. देन वर्कशॉप में सेफ्टी प्रिकॉशंस का लेना बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है. सो एवरी टास्क, एवरी स्किल विच द पर्सन इज परफॉर्मिंग, ही हैज टू ऑब्जर्व द सेफ्टी प्रिकॉशन. Then ingenuity in the use of material. इसको आप जनरल बिहेवियर में भी ले जा सकते हैं और यहाँ भी ले सकते हैं, तो एक जगह पे आप इसको इंक्लूड कर सकते हैं. Then timely completion is very very important because each process in the workshop has a fixed time. तो आप timely completion. इसी तरह ड्राइंग वर्क में timely completion is very important. अब देखिए इसमें क्वालिटी ऑफ रिपोर्ट आई हैव ऑलरेडी डिस्कस्ड, सो वो मैंने एलिमेंट यहाँ से निकाल दिया है. क्वालिटी ऑफ प्रोडक्ट, नाउ देयर इज अ टेंजिबल आउटकम. तो अब टेंजिबल आउटकम का एज पर द स्पेसिफिकेशन बना है कि नहीं बना है, ये आपने देखना. उसकी टॉलरेंस लिमिट्स में वो है या नहीं है, वो आपने देखना. सो सी आई पुट dimensions, shape, finish and tolerance limit. So depending upon the nature of the product which you will be getting out of a workshop exercise, you need to identify its essential attributes और उन essential attributes को आपने weightage देनी. General behavior में you can see care of tools, care of working space, material, working time, attitude towards team member, responsibility, independent. Some of these elements can be included. Viva voce is understanding of the processes. ठीक है जी? Then see drawing work. How many of you actually guide the drawing work? आप करते हो? नहीं. Anybody at Chandigarh University is involved in drawing work? नहीं, ड्राइंग वर्क तो नहीं कोई करा रहा?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so I think I can skip this and we move on to the project work which is given to the students. And here you can see on one side, I have written that selection of the project, then comes the planning of the project, then comes execution of the project, then comes the report writing and presentation. And when we talk in terms of selection of the project, two important parameters. What is the contribution of the student in selection of the project? And second thing is the nature of the problem which the student has taken up. And when we talk in terms of students' contribution, as I said earlier, the initiative the student has taken to identify the problem. Interest he has taken to tap various resources to come out with the problem. Imaginativeness on the part of the student. रूटीन ही तो नहीं उठा के ले आया, उसने कुछ अपना दिमाग भी लगाया, कुछ ओरिजिनल बात करी या कुछ नहीं. Nature of the problem. Nature of the problem would be whether the problem is relevant, novel, original, worthwhile, and the degree of challenge which is involved in that. ऐसा कुछ मतलब उसको कुछ चैलेंज तो बच्चे को देना चाहिए, बिकॉज कहते हैं अगर बहुत आसान हो ना कोई चीज तब भी मोटिवेशन आपकी लो हो जाती है, अगर बहुत डिफिकल्ट हो तब भी आपकी मोटिवेशन खत्म हो जाती है. So tasks should be such where 50% chances of success are there, 50% chances of failure are there. Then only you put your best in that task. Then planning. Planning takes care of defining the problem, methodology for conducting or executing the project, and the general behavior. And here you see accuracy in defining the problem, appropriateness relating to the outcome, what will be the outcome of that project. Then जहाँ तक methodology का सवाल है, you need to check the appropriateness, the feasibility of that methodology, and the clarity of methodology to the student. Then general behavior में कितना उसने initiative लिया, कितना resourceful था बच्चा, क्या उसकी reasoning ability है, कितना creative है, कितना self reliant है. ये तो ना कि रोज आके यही बोल रहा है मैम आगे बताओ क्या करना है, मैम अब क्या करना है, सर आप बताओ क्या करेंगे. So maybe all the time he is depending upon the teacher. So you need to have a student whereby he can take his own decision and he can come out with his own ideas. Execution. जब execution की बात करते हैं तो performance of the student, then general behavior. दो चीजें आपको observe करनी है. Now when we are talking in terms of project work, at each stage the student needs to be evaluated. ठीक है ना, हर स्टेज पे अलग अलग आपको इवेल्युएट करना है. अब परफॉर्मेंस की बात करें तो एबिलिटी टू फॉलो करेक्ट प्रोसीजर, मैनिपुलेटिव स्किल, ऑब्जर्व, रिकॉर्ड एंड इंटरप्रेट, इंजेन्युइटी इन द यूज ऑफ मटेरियल, टारगेट अचीवमेंट. ये वही कंपोनेंट है जो लैब वर्क के लिए आए या वर्कशॉप के लिए आए. अब देखिए जो जनरल बिहेवियर है उसमें परसिस्टेंस, वेदर द पर्सन मेंटेन्स और स्टिक्स टू द टास्क, वो लग के काम करता है कि नहीं करता, इंटरेस्ट कितना है, कमिटेड है नहीं है, कॉन्फिडेंस उसमें है, प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग एबिलिटी, बिकॉज ही इज लाइकली टू एनकाउंटर सम ऑफ द प्रॉब्लम्स, ही हैज टू टेक डिसीजन. सो वेदर ही इज रिसोर्सफुल एंड is able to take independent decision, independent problem solving, and what is the promptness to act. Maybe these are some of the elements which can find place. Then report writing, as we said earlier, promptness to, suppose कर लीजिए on a spur of moment you have to take an action, तो आप ले सकते हो कि नहीं ले. eagerness, quickly react to the situation, जो डिमांड कर रही है सिचुएशन. ठीक है. क्वालिटी ऑफ रिपोर्ट, अब देखिए उसकी क्लैरिटी इन प्रेजेंटेशन एंड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ऑफ द रिपोर्ट. सो जो आपने चैप्टर्स बनाए हैं, चैप्टर 1, 2, 3 या जो भी बनाया है, इट शुड बी डिस्टिंक्ट एंड there should be coherence in the presentation of the report. Styles and language, उसने correctness of the language and the style which he has adopted. Normally जो report writing has to be done in the past tense, जो आपने कर लिए, है ना? So past tense में quality of diagrams, drawings, drafts which have been used, quality of conclusions which have been drawn, and जहां से भी उसने matter लिया, whether he has acknowledged the work which has been taken up from others, so cross referencing, then whether he is giving certain suggestions for further research कि इस area में और क्या हो सकता है, ठीक है? Then quality of presentation, you can see कि उसको understand करता है, जो कुछ भी उसने किया उसकी clarity है, और क्या वो बच्चों को अपना एक्सप्रेस कर पाते हैं क्लैरिटी से, एंड देन एबिलिटी टू ड्रॉ कंक्लूजंस एंड जनरलाइजेशन. एडिशनल फैक्टर अगर ग्रुप वर्क है तो ये हो जाएंगे टीम स्पिरिट, शेयरिंग ऑफ मटेरियल्स, पार्टिसिपेशन इन डिस्कशन, एंड देन यू सी क्वालिटी ऑफ प्रोडक्ट. तो फिर ये डिपेंड करेगा किस तरह का प्रोडक्ट इज द आउटकम ऑफ दैट. हो जाता की है हाथ क्यों हो जाता बार बार. So what? So one person, depending upon what is the tangible outcome of the project work, उसकी आप कुछ इसमें देखिए. अब मैंने marketability, cost effectiveness, modernity, these have been added because एक बच्चा जब lab करता workshop, we are not concerned with its feasibility and all that. It is only giving him practice to acquire skill. लेकिन project can have wider application if it is solves a real life problem, maybe one of the industries would like to take up and mass production करना चाहेगा, तो उस केस में आपको cost effectiveness, इसकी marketability का भी ध्यान रखना पड़ेगा, and modernity, whether as per the requirements of the context or not. तो ये सारी चीजें हैं. So accordingly I would say if you have given a project और वो आपका 20 नंबर का है, 30 नंबर का है, 50 नंबर का है, try to divide the number of marks into 4 major aspects: selection of the project, planning for the project, execution of the project, report writing and seminar. अगर ये 5 में आप 4 ले लो, 5 ले लो, 5 में आप divide कर लीजिए. कुछ elements, I don't say that all these elements should find place. आप सिर्फ उन्हीं elements को लीजिए जिनको आप monitor कर सकते हैं, observe कर सकते हैं, and you remain objective. And one request I would make, if the project is taken up in the industry or the student is doing the project work under the supervision of industry personnel, then industry personnel must be involved in evaluation of the students' project work. और जो आप seminar कराते हैं, that should be open seminar where anybody can come and attend from other departments also, so that a person can get an idea what kind of research is going on. You may get a better idea. और जब आप project finalize करते हो, plan कर लेते हो, maybe at that stage a preliminary interaction can take place within the department. बच्चा present करे, the rest of the teachers and some of the students उसी के final year के या first year, second year सबके बैठ सकते हैं. They can give some suggestions to the student. तो एक ये भी अच्छा तरीका होता है कि beginning में जब आपने problem select कर ली, उसके आपने plan कर लिया कैसे करना है. Now the student makes a small presentation of 20-25 minutes to the group. You can invite 1 or 2 experts from outside. उसी दिन बच्चों की 10 की presentation करा दीजिए, and then you will see that whatever project emerges from that and the strategy that emerges may be more meaningful, useful and appropriate. So feedback लेना is very, very important, and then you can improve the quality of the projects which are being undertaken by the student. So friends, this is all about how do we plan, how do we organize, and how do we need to evaluate our students' performance in lab work, in workshops, in drawing work, in project work. And I'm sure that whatever we are doing, if you feel there is a scope for improvement, you can bring in few changes in the criteria and monitor the student performance throughout when they are performing and assess them objectively. So thank you very much. Any questions from your side? Anji, any question you would like to pose? हाँ जी बिल्कुल, मैडम के पास है, आप कॉपी कर सकते हैं। जी, एनी क्वेश्चन फ्रॉम चंडीगढ़ यूनिवर्सिटी कंप्यूटर साइंस और इलेक्ट्रिकल इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स डिपार्टमेंट, कोई क्वेश्चन पूछना चाहेंगे?
नो मैम, थैंक यू मैम।
कुछ समझ भी आया कि नहीं? थैंक यू ले करता मेरा।
हाँ जी मैम।
पहले मैंने दसो कुछ क्लियर होया कि नहीं? हाँ?
हुआ मैम।
अच्छा, अब ऐसा है, the next session which is planned is a task. तो अभी कितना टाइम हो गया है? Let me have a look at the time. It is all, हाँ जी, टाइम दसो मैंने। 11?
15।
15. Okay. So what we do, we break for a cup of tea and बाद आप लोगों ने आके जितने भी कैंडिडेट्स हैं 5-6 मेंबर्स का एक ग्रुप बन जाइए, एक प्रैक्टिकल एक्सरसाइज लीजिए और उस प्रैक्टिकल एक्सरसाइज के मुझे उसका मेन ऑब्जेक्टिव क्या है, उसके प्रोसीजरल स्टेप्स क्या हैं, वो लिखिए और उसको इवैल्यूएट करने के लिए आप क्या क्राइटेरिया यूज करेंगे वो लिखेंगे. So we divide where we have 15 teachers sitting at one center. तो मैं उनसे रिक्वेस्ट करूंगी if they all belong to one computer science, तो आप एक 7 का ग्रुप बना लीजिए, एक 8 का बना लीजिए. So 2 groups work in computer science department. And in electrical and electronics, if we have 30, then we divide ourselves into 7 and 8. So we have 4 groups working in that center. और आप, मैं आपको 45 minutes would be given to you for completion of the task. The rest 45 minutes, all the participants, one member they will from the group will make a presentation and we listen to that and we provide feedback to the individual. Is it okay? Is it okay? Are the instructions clear?
Yes ma'am.
Okay. Another request I have to make, that tomorrow you have a session on setting question paper, which will be followed by analysis of question paper. So the groups which operate, I'll request that you must bring 4 papers from electrical and electronics, and computer science people, they must bring 2 question papers which they use maybe as a class test or end semester examination, and they will be required to analyze those question papers. Along with the question paper, you would be required to have a copy of the syllabus. तो अपना syllabus और अपना question paper एक लेके आइएगा, ठीक है जी? Tomorrow that would be required, so please bring that. Now we break for a cup of tea, reassemble at 11:35. Thank you. विकास चाय अच्छा, मुझे तो अभी तो चाहिए. हाँ जी.